listening, contemplating, and meditating. So taking it from the point of view of meditating on anger here, let's say, for example, someone says something negative towards someone says something negative about me, but I'm told by another person, someone else tells me, oh, this person has said this about you. So initially I don't really pay any attention to that. I even have my doubts as to whether they really said delusion or anger. And then as they continue, as this other person tells me, oh, this third person has said this about you and they're really negative and so forth, then slowly kind of a conviction arises as like, oh, yeah, probably I've said something like that. Oh, yeah, they must have said something like that. So some kind of doubt or conviction arises. So that is similar to the kind of assertion one arrives from independence on listening or studying. And then it becomes stronger, like, oh yeah, they've really said that, and we start ourselves contemplating. It's not just someone else telling us, but we start contemplating on this. Oh yeah, they said this to me. They said this to me before. They always say this to me. Oh, they're really like obnoxious and so forth. So we really start to get this kind of conviction or strong sense. Yes, this person is really harming you. So then it becomes stronger and it becomes a sense of anger kind of grows stronger. And then I familiarize myself with this again and again. I think about it. What have they done? What did they do to me before? What are they doing? I can familiarize myself with this again and again, and that's when a strong feeling arises. So then taking it from the perspective or from the point of view of meditating on the lack of inherent existence, well, again, in the beginning, when I just depend on listening, on the awareness or the wisdom of listening, here I just understand what it means. Other people give me like an explanation on what it means to lack inherent existence. There's nothing from the depth of my heart. There's no real understanding from the depth of my heart, but some kind of comprehension with regard to what lack of inherent existence refers to. And then independence on reasons such as scriptural reasons as well as logical reasons, then I really come to understand that phenomena do not exist inherently. I come to some kind of decisive conclusion with regard to the absence of inherent existence. And that's the second step of contemplation. And then lastly, with regard to meditation, is familiarity. Again and again, familiarizing myself with this idea. And then it becomes like the way His Holiness has, on one occasion has said so, has actually expressed the idea that he said that when I look at you, I don't see you in the same way as ordinarily people would perceive you. Which implied in this is that His Holiness is able to perceive other living beings as like illusion-like, having that sense of other phenomena as being just like an illusion or just like a magician's conjunction. A magician's kind of appearance.
可惜呢，去沙巴城的原因在研究谢谢你，谢谢了。其实我就等到深处的忙起光讲的，刚也有的，没唱完了刚也有的。但第你就是对这，你说是这个的，那你刚也的唱来讲，卡上来定的结束，定位来定的结束，但我的第用的第这个都，我的那啥才是几才呢？你。 근데 지네 엘레 패티쿠라다 베심 추지 강이 친구 체디에 참 광자네 뭐 광자매나 바게 강에 체버선 때스마 지고 용거를 막 된 슈칭 용만
So here this is something I want to share with people who are new to Buddhism. So, I mean, all of us have kind of mental problems, we have mental kind of difficulties and so forth. So when some difficulty arises, usually what happens is that initially we think about this. Okay, so something happens, some problem has arisen. So I think about this problem. Oh, someone has done such and such. Oh yeah, they did this yesterday. Oh, they did this before. True. And they've hurt me in this way and they've hurt me in that way. And I have so many problems and so many difficulties. So we think about this, make it bigger and bigger. And we think about it, reflect on it, we contemplate on this again and again and again. And then it becomes really strong. There's a really strong feeling of displeasure, really strong feeling of unwellness. But actually, when the problem initially arose, there was a little bit of sense of displeasure, a slight sense of not feeling comfortable, but we didn't feel so negative about it. We weren't so unhappy about it the same way we were after we thought about this for so long. So there was just a kind of slight sense of discomfort.
天地搞了说了累比起来嘛不要了吧？就是个记住呢，啊，第一层呢，哎，那个我的刚才天的民族，我的听见天的都是累比错的，样那样，实际的平嘛了，样那样都上下的，他妈的几乎人什么这样过，刚才有个的的这样的用过的的。
So likewise, one can also look at the positive side, because whatever exists, it is interdependent. There's a mutual dependence here. So therefore, to think, oh, I don't have this problem, I don't have that problem, I don't have this. Unfortunately, when it comes to this, I have these opportunities, I have these facilities, all the facilities are there when it comes to this. So to think about it again and again. So in that way, I can also come to see the fortune I have. So in that way, I can also train myself again and again to look at the positive in my life.
但其实第光芒先不赢了，研究起，那边呢，我这位呢，尼库、卡拉萨、江江州、对吧？德莫拉达、都去呢，那光叫农药嘛，其实他用我几个嘛是吧？第一次的光亚个的叫农没不能行，光多个的叫农没不学的。是吧？刚开始的车嘛，基本上用过的，俺怕常常拿钱，俺先别怕现在的研究些的，俺可光多个的嘛，不介的这边的多个用的几个嘛。
So it was like me, like in my case, what I do is I sleep, I eat, I go for walks, I watch movies. So I don't have any kind of experience. But then the good part is that I also don't engage in the negative kind of analysis, in the kind of harmful type of analysis. So when something negative appears to me or arises in my life, something negative happens, I don't dwell on it. I don't go over it again and again and again. Of course, I also don't do the positive one. I can also not engage in the positive type of analytical meditation, but at least I'm not being bothered about again and again dwelling upon all my problems and all my difficulties.
但我是老过一条的，对了，他其实人性民度两度过面的了，大参与多，也的人性民不推不起，今天呢就是团的人性没他觉得生理不给点别起，是吧？但西内当点别是。点别起，俺地心呢，俺心呢地，俺样都过面差个多。但等到今年以内没结果了，俺拍个경쟁的，俺대버住个真的这个民族是吧？原来这个民族，没那这个民族是，俺地경쟁的他呢，俺变得原来这个民族是，其实原来的他就是公民的，俺没那这个民族没把马的身体的公民的，这个没被경쟁的气质。 아니 이래 마셔스. 너도 다기 니 초보치기 뒤져되나 시래. 아니 점령지 거는 편도 요레스. 지어버레스. 굉장히 디토네 점령지 거 말아. 디코 점령지를 지어고 말아. 다디 일을 지주 매비 지어고. 다디 토네 일을 지는 특임도 세니 시디 얘기를 마도 일을 미치고 권한디 주제를 얘기입니다. 주제들은 주제니들 저러 따다 얘기입니다.
So then, what I'm actually trying to say here with regard to the actual kind of meditation here, well, phenomena, so the way to go about it with regard to the lack of inherent existence, so understanding that phenomena do not exist inherently, so they're not actually inherently there. So I come to this, I distill it from the point of view of the basis here being the lack of inherent existence, and then I meditate on that again and again. I again and again focus on the lack of inherent existence. But then with regard to those who want to engage in the meditation on nothingness, or in other words, who stop any kind of mental activity, here they cite the reasons for saying, why should I engage into a meditation which is such stopping of any kind of mental activity? Well, what is the reason for doing so? It is because phenomena do not, to say phenomena exist truly is not okay. Saying that phenomena are not existing truly is also not okay. So therefore, I should not engage into any kind of mental activity, because it's neither okay to say that phenomena exist truly, nor is it okay to say phenomena do not exist truly. But this is not a reasoning that establishes really, it's not really the reason for the nothingness here. It's a little bit like before, this friend of mine where I asked what is meditation on love and compassion, when he said just think of the benefits, just think of the benefits for that. So why one should do this kind of meditation? It doesn't really go into the actual object to be established, like what the actual analysis of love and compassion, but just why one should do it. So likewise here, the reason given here, because phenomena do not exist truly, because phenomena do not exist truly, because both is not okay, therefore I should just stop any kind of mental activity. So the reasoning that they rely on is not a reasoning that establishes nothingness or non-activity of the mind. It just establishes, it just gives the reason for why one should do it. So this is similar to this meditation on love and compassion.
디지털 전에 퇴바단 섬중기 시럽이 때는 배우셔죠 디 당 아니 고메니디 카가 차주도 디제나 아니 러빙 카말라실라이 디 틱마레스 아니 퇴섬 지에디 하겠다 고메기 나가때만 신레스로와 아니 강 퇴섬 지교디 마고 마체 곰디 신다지 곰바이나 아니 모저 나가티네스 저에디 되는 파조도 지바레스 어디다 다들 송으로 다 등산 모저 라셔네야로
So here with regard to listening and contemplation, so basically whatever one has established, whatever kind of conclusion one has come to, by way of listening and contemplation, one takes that result, one takes that object, and then meditates on it. Whereas here it's kind of saying, if one engages in the meditation on stopping any kind of mental activity, one does establish the lack of inherent existence and so forth, but meditates in a different way. So the object one has come to establish, the object one has come to understood, is not the object one meditates on, but one meditates on something different. So this is similar to building a road. First one builds a road, but drives somewhere else. Or here's the example of first training a horse on one track, but then running the horse somewhere else.
아니 기시다 로메나니 되기다바나 신티고 말에 로 고민네고스 디 고메 페지 다와 카시 로 카시라다 냠용디 게로 지야이레미시비 다 딘디 토마니기 빌로디 다 로메나니 아니 가사에 배워샤로 지고래 이실로지 예바이나 딘디로디 체마샤도 문다 마시드 체마고라 메라 사르와 다 단다 러시메 버킬링이 디 제바이나 디기 아니 금생기 토네다 제가 처음 따다 게임 거로 섬중을 뒤다 뒤로다 제가 그래서 단다디기 이름이 제가 시에디기 경쟁디다 주전이디기 돈에 제가 처음 있게 당디 레기면다 그 가가 차주네.
So with regard to now the mind that meditates here on suchness, well, first of all, there is really no mind, because one stops all mental activity. So that would be kind of contradictory, because there is no mind. And so if there's no, from the beginning there is no such a mind, well then that such a mind is also then if there is no mind, we also have to say there is no person. Because you cannot have a person without a mind, so there would also be no person. And if you had a mind, well, it would not be a valid cognizer, it would be a valid cognition. So here, when we talk about meditating on the lack of inherent existence, not meditating on the lack of mental activity, or in other words, engaging in the lack of mental activity as that being meditation, but rather, if one meditates on the lack of inherent existence, then the object one has come to establish while engaging in contemplation. In other words, the object one comes to, by the object one has come to realize with an inferential cognizer, because here, reaching the stage of contemplation refers to realizing emptiness by way of an inferential cognizer. So here, in the correct sense, what we would do according to our own system, one meditates now, during the stage of meditation, on the object one has come to establish during the time of contemplation. In other words, one meditates on the object of the inferential cognizer realizing emptiness. Whereas in the case of the non-activity of stopping any kind of mental activity, then what one has come to establish with an inferential cognizer, that object is not being meditated on when engaging in actual meditation because one merely stops mental activity.
제산타 남베기 나렌제기다 저탄디 되게 남베슌시비 칭리제로 다 칭리기 남샤들라 아니 야고지 신비 신용도 엔디토도 딘지리비 신주진 되게 디는 디인구르디 제용도 전에 신인 따주들이 남베 따와제 다 디시 남샤로 엔 딘디톤 레샤비 따주도 고명도 전에 양내 양도 고명도 엔디 남긴 남샤제 엔 딜라데네 엔티다투미 지구 주비지 도시에 대해디 라심메보 고메들 따다리기도 니라 엔 덴제기 두수 신고 덴제 마시나 김생화를 요마로 덴제 남샤디 신베토네 다 땡기유는 땡루 컨티 땡기도 세용도 심슈 제용도 전에 다 되기 토네 엔 라심메보디 따다 내용이지 엔 따주디 내로 라심미도 시비 따주디 엔 따주 디실라 샤네 다 뭐예네 지라 파기 능출라 아니 덴제라 소베 참이지 난기도디 뭐예네 지 원도 지나 다 라심 민두스 라신이 민두스에디 다 따와디 레차비체라 이 고발을 때네 아니 용무되기디 봐 다지 엔티부터비 남샤지 두슬리기도 다 대기들라 대기 고메들라 딘지기 남샤한테 따다 용문도 그런 고민자 당치를 해마도
So with respect to the Nalanda scholars, so the way in which, according to the Nalanda tradition, the Buddhist kind of scriptures, the way it is explained is that first, by way of reasoning, by way of analysis and reasoning, one first applies, one takes, for example, a correct syllogism, and investigating, analyzing the correct reason, one comes to a specific view, one establishes a certain view with regard to reality. So that is the basis of the three bases, path and result. That is the basis. One establishes reality. And then one meditates on that reality. So that meditative kind of awareness we call the path. And then that path, that kind of meditative awareness, eventually leads to certain results. So in other words, here with regard to the basis, first we come to understand that phenomena are dependently arisen. When it comes to that understanding, that explanation is given. And if they're dependently arisen, well, how do they exist? And that takes us to the understanding that they are not existent, they do not exist inherently, they do not exist intrinsically. And then thinking about that, taking that as the basis, so whatever appears to us from the point of view of the appearance of phenomena, their interdependence, we understand that though they appear that way, their actual nature is the lack of inherent existence. So we understand, we have an understanding of the lack of inherent existence. And then we familiarize ourselves with that understanding. We meditate on that understanding. And then this meditating mind in turn eliminates, it purifies all the different afflictions. And one reaches the resultant state of that purified state, or the purification or absence of these afflictions. So this is how it is done from the point of view of actually meditating on emptiness and so forth. But such a result, such a basis, path, result cannot be found when one's main meditation refers to the meditation of just refraining from any kind of mental activity. There is no way in which one can come to such a result.
同样的方法去解释所谓的无自性，完全不做力这样的修行，我们就发现它就只是一种修行方法而已。但你刚才讲的这种激荡火的论述，却完全无法成立。
나 단다게 딜라 띵이진 공단기 토안에다 편도시 용되고 근데 띵이 지에 이름이 집어 두스고 SMD 아니 샘들라 아니 강보를 붙이 나와 시안에 봐 쳐주고도나 강보디 제니 많이 용도 강보 나와데 가도로 이름이 집어라 라절레도 다가라고 야나면은 치료를 해 봐지 아니 바기도 진 공대비 가도로 아니 콘로이나 되샤도도 스키오나 되샤 파란다든지 되샤 파란다든지 되샤디 나와디 예루 야 이름이 집어라 라절레도 제산다 바기 제디기 이름이 집어 레기 탑시지도 자기도 그다 지발에 대기 시대에 되게 제디기 자심에 벌레 탑시에 단다 제디기 이름이 집어 레 탑시 임버 지발에 이는 조당디 대기디 투중 섬중 검중 조당디 여버체 단다디 딘지 조당디 레면도 그 조당지도 요래 제디 이름이 집어 두스레 되지.
So now with regard to this kind of meditation of just stopping any kind of mental activity, well, that is definitely beneficial for the development of concentration, so to not engage in any kind of mental activity. With respect to, for example, when one meditates, then there's an object of distraction, an object one may focus on, and then when one takes that object of distraction and one searches for it, not finding it, in that moment that object disappears, and taking that disappearance as an opportunity, that sense of disappearance as an opportunity to stop any kind of mental activity, or even if one were not to take an external type of object, but one were to just focus on anger and attachment. So when one focuses on those two awarenesses, whatever appears to those awarenesses, that disappears. So upon searching for the kind of appearance in that mind, when one searches for that appearance, that awareness itself, it disappears. And one, this non-findability then takes one to understanding, or takes one to engaging in meditation of stopping any kind of mental activity. So, but this is, it's kind of a technique. It's like we use this initial kind of searching for something as a technique. But this is different to previously the explanation where you search for something and what you find is the lack of inherent existence. The lack of inherent existence then becomes your object of meditation, and it takes you from the basis to the path and eventually to the result. So, and also by way of going through the listening and contemplating and meditating, so one takes the object of the lack of inherent existence, that is the object that one listens to, that is the object one contemplates on, and that is eventually the object one meditates on. So the previous meditation of stopping any kind of mental activity is quite different from that.
그래서 수술 똑바로 때네 미토비시 지그리 세기 룽요레 산지 가나다 요레 수술 똑바로 때네 미토비시 지그리 세기 룽몽 같이 용거 진짜 디 제단디 다 단다 이래 미지바 디 챙이디 되길라마나시 수술 똑바로 때네 다 제니 디기 에 이래 미지바 가나라 저 줄레 정도 다른 뜻이야 대가 다 현다 정신이 봐 killing 뒤주기 수술 또네 딜레테네 제바체마게 딜레테네 신내고 딜레테네 학동고 디참은 똑바래 딜레테네 탈 아니 동만이 무슨 도도 믿어비 시제 탈 무엇이 있다 삼못한 기시고.
So there are also scriptural citations or scriptural kind of passages when, say, for example, it is through discerning conceptual consciousness that one overcomes conceptual consciousness, or in other words, through conceptual discernment, or through discerning conceptual awareness, one then achieves the non-conceptual. So there are plenty of citations or plenty of quotes from the Buddha which kind of express this sentiment. For those who accept that the main method to enlightenment is engaging in the meditation of stopping any kind of mental activity, they take this citation to mean, that upon investigating any kind of discerning, upon investigating any type of awareness, then in the end you cannot find it, and not being able to find it, you just stop on that you focus on that non-findability in the sense that you stop any kind of mental activity. So they use this as a proof of saying first you look for the object and then you engage into non-activity, non-mental activity. But from the point of view of those who follow the assertion that ultimate truth refers to the lack of inherent existence, well, first they establish the lack of inherent existence and by way of independence on a inferential cognizer, they realize the lack of inherent existence with an inferential cognizer. Then they generate calm abiding, then they generate special insight, and then that special insight is transformed, its conceptual special insight is transformed into a direct perception of the lack of inherent existence. So they take it kind of further away, and the result is then a non-conceptual awareness that is free from conception.
아니 또바 마인바다 다셔버려 그런적인 또바 인leg 말하다 마인디 전에 다 도메시가 차주디도 무슨 해줘래 딜레디다 도마니 무슨 도비 로시게 냠샤이시 차줘 디제바이나 레라부지 차도레 다 간들이야 퍼진네 셰셰 조다디 다 차상 퍼진네 아니 돈잉에다 төсөмг 때나 그때네 신의 죽들라면에 저놈 시림지게 그봐 아니 신의 돈이 무슨 또에 시고르봐 다 단다디 디담 베드 거는 경계 차그래 다 직전에 믹스기 메가 있는데 조금 직절들 들리게 하면마다 퍼진 셰셰게 돼서 다 견다다 차도르다
So, with regard to this lack of mental activity, so this is regarded as meditating on the ultimate truth. This is regarded as meditating on emptiness, this kind of absence of mental activity. So, here it shows what is clear here is such a meditative mind, this absence of mental activity, is not a conceptual concept. So, if it is not conceptual, the only other solution would be as a direct perception. So that means that the moment you take to mind as nothingness and you stop mental activity, you realize emptiness directly. But this is in contradiction to what you find in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, where you cannot realize emptiness directly, immediately, in the sense that first you generate the understanding based on listening, and then you develop a real understanding of emptiness. Then you depend on calm abiding. Then you generate the four levels of the path of preparation, the four kind of sub-levels of the path of preparation. And only then can you realize emptiness directly. So this explanation that you find in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra contradicts the explanation where the moment you take to mind emptiness by way of not having any mental activity, you do so by way of a direct perception. That would be contradictory. But Geshe-la is saying maybe that's some special type of teaching of some quick kind of method or the quick kind of instruction that leads to quick results.
And it's something they show, and it's what you do. Because that Tony comes in a Chebachin Congo, and Chebacheta machine of Archivers, Tire. Hello, Tiochiomel. And this.
结巴切怎么样呢？做篱笆陪着当年结巴切什么？那篱笆哈国把哈马国把应当别下讲落，那篱笆的开始以内的讲过什么？那讲结巴的篱笆的讲的那篱笆的俺篱笆嘛嘞，篱笆的俺论经切过的嘛都俺陪着当初陪篱笆嘛嘞，第一根基那当你公会告诉篱笆陪着当那那篱笆的他那俺话篱笆。마인데 값소 나 강제스 동이 공바디 강제스 브레이크래.
So her question is, Geshe-la is saying that, okay, so let's leave for today the class at that, and there's one question that Geshe-la wants to answer here. So the question is, are you saying that if you engage in analysis but you do not know how to do it, then you don't know how to analyze, you don't know how to use the reasoning, how do you meditate on that? And then the Chinese translator confirmed that she said, yes, let's say I do learn about these different reasonings, I listen to them, I learn about this, but I don't really understand the reasoning. So taking the example of, I take the scriptures, I read the scriptures, I read what is in there, I even memorize it, but I'm unable to use it. So what am I going to do? Like if I don't know how to apply these reasonings that you present, I don't know how to apply them correctly, how can I then actually meditate on emptiness?
That dimena Kashor, Misan Yar, Yasa, Yar, Sa, Irgidre Yomar. Tabu Yar, Di Marzache, Sonjagin, Leachigin, Che, a Parajilan Suzuki, Dile, and Yargodi, Yarmoche, Yargod Paloshan, and Susala Lesaro. Tanya the Pejed Yarguro, Tashi Yomaro, Tamina Randoki Shending, Komorova. Pejed Yar, Di Pejice, a Sharkom Lagroa, Pejana Shivana Shinima. 디제션의 샤곰을 줘로 이네 다라 장장 제대는 이렇게 줘요 말로 다 디수수리 거다 디샤야지리 아니 제 샤곰디 어스 레스비 제라 아니 제바체지 오네 레베 오네 칸레 마레 스네 수수기 아니 디제니 바기 리버디 빼다기 전에 수술하는 시절에 답시 제거라. 너무네. 디체온데 바라지도 수술 권리 내려야지. 차거.
So, for example, if I don't have any money, I go to someone else, I borrow some money, I spend it. Then I have to go again, borrow some money, spend it. Borrow some money, spend it. So it goes on endlessly. So if instead, if I borrow some money, I now use this money as the kind of capital, as a kind of capital. So that's my capital kind of money, and then that money I use to engage in business. For example, I engage in all sorts of affairs. I kind of multiply the money. In other words, I make more money. That is the way to do it. So likewise here, I receive a teaching. So that's a bit like borrowing money from someone. So I just receive a teaching. I kind of put it. I kind of meditate it by way of kind of posit it on my mind. In other words, I kind of make it appear to my mind. I memorize it. I make it my own in the sense that I understand what has been said, and then I actually take the reasoning to heart. I take it to a different level. So I do something with the reasoning. I really understand. I try to understand them. I try to take them to heart. I try to think about them and analyze them, investigate them. So kind of make them my own in that sense. So really take them deeper. This is what we need to do here. Not just receive the information and kind of remember it, but rather take it to such a deeper level when this reasoning becomes our own reasoning. We apply it ourselves. So it's coming from within one's own mind, this reasoning comes. It's something that one is not passively taken from someone else, but is now actively becomes part of oneself.
다 대면때나 베베기 리버디 순에디 우메숑네 순거래 이네 지용기 차네 릴람치고 유나 아니 릴람기 토네 비다고 제베체도 거래 다 릴람세디 미카시라 다 비다르라 마데비 랑도기 릴람 요딩이들이 요구도 동세버이네 동세버 카실라 릴람테스 요딩이 카실라 릴람치니 메딩이 디네 용거 다야 카시 딩디기로 저지니야 릴람테스 레딩이 요구도 다 하게 배자랑 기토네 디제베를 레베테시 레베기 답시 제베이나 따다리다 두서 장네니 하게 레투르와.
So basically, here we talk about reasoning. So the reasons that are usually the reasons we use, they are presented in the Madhyamika literature. So these reasonings that we then step by step, we think about them, we develop a kind of logical mind, a logical kind of awareness. We train in that logical kind of mind. So all of us, well, some have kind of a logical mind. So there's some difference with respect to all of us. So some have more of a logical mind naturally, some have less. So some of the people in the villages, they may have a very logical, very kind of systematic kind of mind, and they very easily can take things to mind and use logic to understand phenomena. Whereas there are other people who don't have such an awareness, who don't have such logical abilities. But this can be trained. So what one can do if one doesn't have that kind of logical thinking, one studies the scriptures such as Barik, or as it's also called science and reasoning. So one can study the topic of science and reasoning and is able to actually cultivate, develop such a logical awareness, logical ability.
아무래도 경진제시에 그런 진행 저에 진행 지긴다. 다 뒤지나 괜찮은데 도와 레레레 이네 지긴 원래 말에 다 도와는 레레 이네 지긴 좀 나가요.
My parents both come from a village somewhere in the countryside, from the village. And my father has a bit of like reasoning. He applies reasoning. My mother doesn't apply reasoning at all. So when she wants to do something and then she's told, well, there's some problems if you do this, there may be a problem, she says, yes, but I will still do it. So then you say again, well, but there are these difficulties, there are these problems that may arise, and she's like, yes, that's true, but I'll still do it. So there's really you can't argue with her, you can't kind of discuss with her, you can't kind of reason with her because she still does whatever she wants.
是啊， 多年到我，
不是某些光能继续去给我能帮能他想光能工作给我。